Northern California. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to see so many friendly faces and a couple new folks as well. My name's Ellie Bondstein, and I work for the Wallace Center, and I normally live in Washington, D.C., but I'm actually calling in from my in-laws' house in Vermont today, where it's starting to feel a little bit like fall. And we're here today to talk about a program that the Wallace Center has been hosting that we dubbed the Institutional Investment Accelerator. And Susan's going to talk a little bit about the program and sort of how we got here. But our goal is to really highlight the work of these amazing teams that we've been supporting for the last 18 months through this program, and also hear from their brilliant advisors who have become our sort of extension of our team and have served as mentors and coaches to the folks doing this work on the ground that this program was designed to support. So we'll do a little bit of background from Wallace Center, hear a little from the teams about their work and sort of where they're headed next. And then we'll do kind of an interview style panel with the teams, a few of the teams and the advisors as well. So that's where we're headed today. And we're really excited and grateful for all of our guests and also all of our presenters. We're just had such a wonderful time working together and learning from you all, and can't wait to sort of bring it all to fruition after a lot of work together today. So I think that's it for me, and I'm going to hand it to Susan and share my screen with some slides.
Maybe before you bring up the slide, I'll just talk for a second and then we can put up that graphic.
Okay.
So, hey, everybody, good afternoon. Good to see your faces. I'm Susan Lightfoot-Schempf, co-director of the Wallace Center, and it's really good to see familiar faces, like Ellie said, and also some new folks. I'm calling in from New Orleans, and it is a beautiful day here, and it's really nice to see the sunshine because we've had rain all summer long, which has been a little bit odd, and it's been really cool down here too, which is also odd, but I'll take it because we're not sweating it out. I just want to quickly kind of give a little bit of context as to, what this program has been about and why the Wallace Center set about creating this accelerator. And I think, many of us that are on the call, we have been working in this farm to institution space for a long time. My background's actually in farm to school, and just seeing that power of procurement, right? There's so much potential for community anchor institutions to really step up and be key players in developing more equitable local and regional food systems. And I think for many years, for decades, folks have really been trying to get institutions to use their purchasing power to help build up more sustainable, healthy, equitable supply chains, and also building up economic opportunities for farmers and food businesses, and seeing that like huge amount of demand that comes from schools, universities, hospitals, et cetera, that it's like this untapped potential that we've been trying to break into for a really long time. And there's been a lot of progress made in getting institutions to make procurement commitments. Things like the Good Food Purchasing Policy has really been instrumental in that. Statewide initiatives that have set forward, 10%, 15% local purchasing targets. Like that's all been really, really good work. There's been a lot of great coalition building that's happened to really get institutions to make those commitments. And then we all know too that actually meeting those commitments is a whole other bucket of stuff, right? And that's where the rubber really hits the road, is in helping farmers and food businesses to actually be able to transact with the institutions and to be able to make those sales. And that we open up a huge can of worms around food safety, around quality and consistency, and all of the different areas that we know that farmers and that we serve and that we work with in our networks don't have the same levels of capacity as a lot of the larger industrial food system, distributors, et cetera, that are able to like very consistently meet the expectations and the price line that institutions expect. So this is that nut that we've been all trying to crack for some time, right? But there's a lot of really creative work that all of you have been doing to help really build up those supply chains and to work with institutions in new and creative ways. And so what we wanted to do through this Institutional Investment Accelerator was to find those different strategies that are happening, the community work that's going on, that's trying out new ways of interfacing with institutions and really getting them to step up as equal players in building an equitable food system beyond just purchasing, to really step into working with farmers and building up supply chains, in creating access to land, in using their community benefit dollars in new ways to help build up capacity within the supply chain. So that's really where, like, the spirit of this accelerator, where it came from. It's like, let's get deeper into this and figure out ways to bring on institutions beyond procurement. And how that fits with the Wallace Center strategy. If we want to pull up the our infinity graphic. So this is one way that we kind of think about, or that we do, we drive our work. So Wallace Center has two overarching goals, and you'll probably see this in a lot of our work, and they're very much interlinked. So strengthening the change ecosystem, that's y'all. That's the people that are doing this work. The change ecosystem is the movement, the people who are on the ground, practitioners who are working to shift the food system, to transform the food system, to build opportunity and equity in our food systems at the community level, and regional and national levels. So we do that through supporting leadership development, through connecting people for learning, for collaboration, and creating action across communities. So that's sort of like this left-hand side of the affinity group. And so that's probably, you're very familiar with those kinds of programs that we offer to help support all of you and helping strengthen and support you as you do your work. On the right side, it's about, like, what are we actually doing to transform the food system? What are the innovations? What are the new ideas? What are the strategies, the actual tactics that we're using to shift the food system? And so we focus in on specifically on values-based supply chains. So that's where this work is around the Institutional Investment Accelerator, a lot of our work around value chain coordination, which also really sinks in well here. And then our partners and within the Resilient Ag and Ecosystems team, really focusing in on regenerative land use. So some of y'all might not be as familiar with that area of work, but that's another really core part of the Wallace Center. So, all of that is anchored in a mission and a commitment to forging equity and justice in food and farming systems. So this accelerator, like, hits on all these points. And so we were really excited to offer this opportunity to the world, and to the teams that ended up participating and developing relationship with us and the advisors over the last year and a half. So with that, maybe Ellie, I can hand it to you to talk a little bit about the accelerator itself. And please hit anything important that I missed as I was rambling on there.
Oh, that wasn't rambling. Okay, so the way that this accelerator was structured was that we brought in 3 advisors who have a ton of expertise, both in farming and food systems, and also in the way that institutions work, how they buy food, and sort of those structures, those supply chains. So those advisors were Haile Johnston from the Common Market, Pakou from the Hmong American Farmers Association, and Lucia Sayre from Healthcare Without Harm. And we worked with those advisors to pull in 6 teams. So each advisor had a really close partnership with 2 teams. And the teams are made up of 3 people, some from different institutions and organizations, and some from the same. The teams were from Denver, Baltimore, Northwest Arkansas, Portland, Oregon, West Virginia, and Chicago. And you can see our cute little map, and we paired 2 teams with each advisor. And then over the course of the accelerator, which lasted from February, March of 2021 until just a few weeks ago in July, we had regular calls with the teams, and the teams were regularly interfacing with their advisors to work on strategy, to develop some of those skills to advance their strategy. And then also provided a couple sort of specific touch points to help these teams have the space and time to do some imagining, to really understand their values, and then figure out how to develop a strategy that was really aligned with the assets in their community, with their values, and with the vision that they had co-developed. So this is just kind of an overview of what that looked like. We also were able to get most of the folks in this program together in June in Oregon. So we finally, after lots of pandemic disruption, were able to be together and really cement those relationships. But it was about 16, 18-month program that was meant to just augment and provide a lot of support and time for these teams to learn about collaboration, to learn about their strategies, and then work with their advisors and some external technical assistance support to figure out how to really operationalize those. So I think after that sort of overview, one of the things that we realized over the course of developing and implementing this program with the teams and advisors was that the problem that we were trying to solve, this problem of why institutions aren't living up to their procurement goals, why they aren't investing more in equitable food systems, was sort of hard to map and describe. So we did a kind of fun, creative process with an organization called Illustrating Progress to try and sort of describe and put this in a different way to understand than us just writing lots of paragraphs about it. So I'm actually going to invite Roberto Meza, who is on the Denver team, to talk a little bit about this graphic and sort of why we created it, and maybe how it helped us understand the problems that we were grappling with.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellie. And it's such a pleasure to kind of revisit this graphic again and kind of go through the whole experience of this accelerator. This was so hard to map out because all of the teams really provided their own expertise, awareness of the challenges related to their specific context and everything else that was involved in their strategies. And it's really abstract. Like the problems are really abstract because that's how they've been engineered. That's how our food system has been engineered, right? And so it's really hard for us to really grasp and pinpoint entryways and pathways and ways that we can weave together solutions or emergent initiatives. So everybody during this kind of graphic recording of our experiences, of our thoughts, of our ideas, really imparted their own personal experiences as practitioners, as strategic partners, consultants, even representatives of specific institutions. And as we started providing some of these reflections, we began to realize that a lot of them really had a lot to do with a specific way of thinking about food that conditions how we purchase and how we prioritize different things. So the barriers for me really kind of anchor themselves within perspectives and paradigms around food and how we've been conditioned to think about food without really understanding a very strong context for its history, for how these problems came to be, and for how we've been somewhat separated from the true core and essence of what food is and constitutes within our communities and within the work that we do. And so really looking at what it means to purchase food, to consume food, to bring food, allowed us to actually surface a lot of these things that have been tucked away or mystified in some sense. So it really showed us that the values condition this food system that operates on pricing, logistics, incentivizing large kind of corporate capacity, and disincentivizing the values that really help to regenerate, to think of ourselves as part of an ecosystem. I'm a farmer, first generation, and so a lot of my perspectives around food come from the soil. And I look at the symbiotic relationship between fungi and bacteria and worms and all the different microorganisms that make food possible. So if we really look at the way that nutrients are transferred underneath our feet, we can begin to think for how nutrient or food or capital, resources, and technical assistance can also transfer itself throughout the ecosystem in our social food ecosystem. And so what we're looking at now is like the relationships are so important, right? Building capacity with each other, building relationships that allow us to advance our projects, our initiatives, strategic partnerships, and begin to think of all of ourselves as part of an ecosystem, that we all have something of value to provide to weave together something that is resilient in the face of a pandemic or in the face of supply chain disruptions, because we don't want to experience what we experienced during COVID. We really want to create something new and emergent out of that experience. And at the same time, centering the history of agriculture that in the United States is rooted in stolen land and forced labor. How do those things continue to show up in our work? How do those things continue to be sublimated within this business as usual logistical way of dealing with food in our communities and in our institutions? And how do we begin to shift power and incentivize institutional partnerships so that we provide access to land and promote BIPOC farmers and course correct some of those legacies of exclusion? And I think that, again, begins to make us feel that we're active participants rather than passive consumers, that we co-create together for public benefit, and to view food as a public service and farming as a public service, much less than just simply a commodity. So we're in this pivotal point, and I think this accelerator gave us an opportunity to develop different narrative understandings, frameworks, storytelling techniques, and ways of creating pathways and inroads in creating beneficial relationships with institutions who, have the power and influence to really help us shift the food system. So I'm excited to have this conversation today with everyone, and really looking forward to some emergent dialogue.
Thanks, Roberto. It was such a fun and sort of like expansive exploratory process creating this graphic together. And I really appreciate the way that you kind of placed it in the context of the experience that we had through the accelerator. So thank you. I realized I left out one important detail as I was getting ready to introduce Roberto, which is that before we launched the accelerator, we knew that there had been a ton of brilliant work and a lot of people that had made a lot of progress in understanding the role of institutions in creating an equitable food system. And we did a lot of research with our friends at Center for Good Food Purchasing, with Healthcare Without Harm, Farm to Institution New England, Kitchen Sink Strategies, and Heal Food Alliance. And I just wanted to drop a link to some resources and webinars that we had in preparation for the accelerator to help us understand the ecosystem, to use Roberto's word, that we were entering into when we were trying to work in institutional procurement and beyond. So here's a link for people that really want to dig in and learn more about kind of the basis and some great examples of institutional investment that are going on around the country. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it to Andrew, and he's going to get into it a little more with the teams.
All right, thanks, Ellie. And I saw the comment about the graphic, but we'll definitely share that with everybody and get it on our site. We'll see how it prints, but yeah, I'm glad that you would like to print it. So this is a kind of a heady topic and like theoretical. We started with an infinity diagram, of our strategic plan. And so I wanted to ground it in some examples from hearing from the teams and what they were working on throughout the accelerator and some of their learning. So we'll do over the next about 20 minutes, just hear from 3 of the teams that were in the accelerator from their perspective. And you'll see that each was different. Everyone came in with a different idea and different place in their work as far as how long they'd been doing it, and came up with unique strategies. So we thought the best way would be to let you hear from the teams themselves to ground it. And we have, just so Roberto, Kelly, and Megan, we have your graphics pulled up. If you'd like to use those anytime, just let us know. Ellie can show those. But we'll start with Roberto again, just to introduce yourself and name who the partners were on your team. And just start with that.
Yeah. So my name is Roberto Meza. I was part of the Denver team, participating as East Denver Food Hub, along with Jason Auguste, who is a representative of Frontline Farming, a nonprofit BIPOC organization here in Denver, and Reed Smith, who really helped us navigate the food safety challenges pertaining to local producers and farmers, so we could access wholesale institutional supply chains. And yeah, should I just kind of explain what the process was for our team, or do you have specific questions, Andrew?
Sure, if you want to share, what you were aiming to do with institutions, you were starting into that, and what throughout this period, what worked, what went well in that work.
Yeah, so our project was kind of twofold, was to understand and reflect on the lack of farmers of color, BIPOC producers in the Front Range here in Colorado, and then what institutions can do to help promote more more racial equity and justice in the local farming community here. And so Jason and I and Reed really came together to see how we could create a strategy that allowed us to activate current partnerships that we already had. The work that we've done up to this point really enabled us to create a network that we could now kind of activate in a form of transactions to really flow more dollars into our communities and into the work that we're doing. One of the major challenges that we realized that was really apparent was that despite the fact that we had allies and support and partners, it was really difficult to actually manifest those things into transactions, particularly because we in the local food system here haven't had an opportunity to build up our capacity, to build up the production, to acquire the necessary infrastructure. And those were things that really started to come kind of in the wake of COVID, when we had a lot of dollars flowing into food systems to address food insecurity, and combined with the awareness and the framework of racial equity, those things really started to flow into spaces that really needed them. But it's hard to really build up in 2 years what has been taken away from us in hundreds of years. And so that was something that we really wanted to lay down the foundation for. And so this accelerator was really an opportunity to understand other strategies that folks were imparting in other regions, and to learn from their successes, to understand their specific strategies and find commonalities across regions, but also to see ways that we could collaborate, ways that we could share knowledge, experiences, technical assistance, and also to provide a space to kind of share our frustrations and also our joys in doing this work. I found that was an unintended consequence. When I first started the accelerator, I didn't quite know how it was going to be structured, if it was going to be super programmatic and very like specific to workshops and trainings, or if it was just going to be much more experimental and relational, so that we could really create something together. But I think for us, what was most important was the community mapping, the power mapping, to chart where our partners were in respect to the objectives and the work that we were trying to accomplish, and to also understand, how do we begin to convey our experiences that are so deep and incarnate within us as BIPOC farmers, as local food advocates and distributors, to kind of incentivize the support and the partnership of institutions that really seem to be out of touch and out of reach. Our main objective was to see if it was possible to create a farm to institution model that we knew existed in other regions, but had yet to really come to fruition in Colorado. And, I think our success is really evident now in how we've been able to create some partnerships and contracts with local schools who understand what we're doing, who get the vision, who see themselves as agents of change as well. Hospitals have been a little bit of a slower moving partner, but we're hoping to get there someday. And I think now we're left with more questions, but even more enthusiasm to continue the work.
Awesome, thanks for sharing that. And wanted to point out what Roberto was saying about the accelerator being a space for support and also just incubating different strategies, and how a lot of what came out of it were strategies like that teams had the chance to reflect and think on how they were going to advance this work specifically. Roberto, the last question is just, are there specific things on the horizon in this work for your team? Like, what's coming next for you all?
Yeah, well, if you have that graphic, Ellie, I'd love to kind of, if not, I can try and pull it up too. This was kind of the last piece of the accelerator that we put together. And so, let's see. There it is. And so as we're thinking about ecosystems, I think what's on the horizon for us is how do we communicate everything that we're doing that now has really taken place on our farm, but also at the Food Hub, which are two separate organizations. The farm is called Emerald Gardens. It's 35 acres where we're incubating sugar moon mushrooms, pictured here to the right of our logo. We're also launching a commercial cooperative egg operation that's right now only selling to wholesale markets and grocery stores, but we do hope to build it up to support our institutional objectives as well. And then partnering with Spirit of the Sun, which is a newly formed partnership to support an agroecology indigenous youth education program. Spirit of the Sun is a nonprofit organization doing amazing work with indigenous youth, and really using the 35 acres as a model for experimenting with land access opportunities. And the Food Hub is really there to create the logistical and distribution, but also the partnership development that will support this kind of budding cooperative on the farm. And institutions, I think, are going to play a huge part in really helping us fortify that ecosystem and that value chain, so that we can really showcase what an equitable food system can look like. Even just in the way that we have opportunities to address both support for local farmers on the land, on our land, and also for the distribution of food, be it to food pantries, food banks that are purchasing food, or to hospitals and schools that can also provide a community benefit. And so what's on the horizon for us is like, how do we really streamline and integrate all these things? Our advisor was Haile Johnston, who has years of experience actually creating this model and really looking at institutional partnerships to support local farmers and BIPOC farmers. And he really gave us so much to think about, not just in terms of the vision and the values, but also the essential logistics that are needed to actually make this work. Sometimes it's so easy to get too embedded within our mission and our vision for things that we forget the purely logistical things that make a lot of this work happen. And so he was really great at helping us anchor our values into very pragmatic and practical steps to really circulate food through our communities. So now we're really at a point where we're trying to crystallize and really like fine tune a lot of these things that we've seeded throughout the accelerator.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that. All the things that are, that you've seeded through this, and pointing out too that this is a space to grow ideas and also focus on which things do you want to put energy to now to make them happen next. So thank you for sharing that. We'll have more chances later for you to share through a panel, but wanted to jump to West Virginia University, to Megan Govindan, and allow you to just introduce yourself and the other organizations on your team, and big picture, what your team was aiming to do.
Thanks, Andrew. And hey, everybody. My name is Megan Govindan. I am a research associate at the West Virginia University Office of Health Affairs. And our office represents a state university partnership where we work with state agencies and organizations to implement, manage, and evaluate health initiatives. And I had the honor and privilege, especially as a woman of color, leading the West Virginia team, which included myself, Casey Ganser, a planning coordinator from the West Virginia Department of Agriculture, Patty Miller of Grow with the Flow and Value Cluster Initiative and at Natural Capital Investment Fund, and also lots of great support from Rachel Baker and Vishaka Turner here at WVU. We were partnered with Lucia Sayre from Healthcare Without Harm, and we received such transformational guidance. We have so many really inspirational breakthroughs. It's kind of hard to start with. So I think you wanted to know a little bit more about what we were aiming to do with institutions.
Yeah, if you can share, or if, I know coming in, that was something you defined. So it could be now what you're aiming to do with institutions.
Yeah, as a multidisciplinary team with different folks at the table, we didn't really know what the heck we were doing. We just know we wanted to coalesce around the Fresh Food Act, which requires institutions that are state funded to purchase 5% of their food from in-state producers. And to satisfy this, they can purchase directly or indirectly meats, poultry, milk, other dairy products, or other foods grown, produced, processed by in-state producers. It's a tremendous commitment from our state, but we're faced with challenges. We lead the nation in small family-owned farms, and so we knew we needed to scale up production, and we were really looking to see what institutional investment there was, and with the help of the Wallace Center and Healthcare Without Harm and our amazing advisors, Lucia Sayre and Pakou, we were able to have some real breakthroughs, and they're really kind of illuminated in the graphic recording that Ellie shared. So I'll kind of use that to kind of springboard how we found a bridge over troubled water. If you're seeing the water kind of permeate through that graphic there, as well as the rolling hills we have in Appalachia, and we have some geographical challenges as well. So we were able to use Healthcare Without Harm's framework, the Healthy Food Playbook, to be able to apply that to our community health needs assessments and really leverage a policy. The Affordable Care Act requires nonprofit hospitals to conduct community health needs assessments and develop a report, and then an implementation plan to be able to enact what that report says. And with the support of my team, I was able to step into that role at the WVU Office of Health Affairs and coordinate that for our largest hospital system, which is just bought up 2 hospitals yesterday. So it seems like we're going by leaps and bounds. But even though we were able to identify this institutional leverage stream, we had to be able to see how can we integrate agriculture and health within West Virginia. So as you see the bridge over troubled water, and thinking about how timing is everything, the Affordable Care Act requires hospitals to do this in 3-year cycles. So being able to find the right time when these reports are made to be able to identify the programs is hard. But what we were able to see as we embraced healthcare and agriculture, and you can see like the little hands kind of coming over, right, around collective impact. You see those fingers? We were able to see that we had everything we needed for collective impact. And so collective impact has a couple of stipulations, backbone of support, which Office of Health Affairs and myself were able to provide for the hospital system, a common agenda, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, to be able to move everybody forward. So we started thinking, what spaces do we need to be able to communicate between, and how can we make a third space? So as we leverage this Affordable Care Act policy and these reports of how hospitals are investing outside their walls, we can build up enough production to be able to get food, local food inside those walls too. As we think about some of the values for West Virginia producers, you can see kind of going over to your left or my right, the scale, right? We really grow for community. It's all about neighbors helping neighbors, but how do you balance the two? The devil and the angel there, to be able to increase access to local healthy foods, but also managing costs, but we know that food is medicine, and we know we need to be able to build that bridge between the farm and the hospitals, and that requires collaborative planning for community health and wellness. How do we do that, right? We all speak different languages. We have different motivations for different employers. So you can see that we started to be able to see that we needed some shared language, and we needed to be able to de-silo those different activities to be able to scale up that pace of work. So as institutions are able to buy, we have that production as well. So we're really excited that as we've been able to grow this work here in West Virginia, we're creating a third space to be able to amplify community voices and democratize the information from the community health assessments to be able to make a public database to have a 30,000-foot view of what those investments are. And by shining the light on those investments, we hope to have a power shift to the community, to have the community center their voices and how they want to be able to drive that forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Megan, for that overview. The graphic was helpful here, wasn't it? Last question, just if there's one thing on the horizon you want to point out or something your team you didn't mention here that you're working towards, you want to share.
Yeah, the future is so bright. You know, we're anxiously awaiting the USDA Technical Assistance Investment Cooperative Agreement. We were able to coalesce around that by being engaged in the accelerator. We're looking forward to making our dashboard live, which will showcase community benefit in West Virginia, but then also have a filter to be able to show the activities within the Healthcare Without Harm Healthy Food Playbook to be able to have those doses of activities stacked on a county level. We're looking forward to continuing the conversation for institutional investment, to be able to have quarterly calls to keep this dialogue going, as well as initiating an Anchoring Resilient Communities table with the support of Healthcare Without Harm to be able to create that third space for communities to speak into the community investment process and hopefully get enough advocacy to have policy change for farm to hospital funds, as well as community benefit policy for the state.
Awesome. Yeah, well, so much to look forward to. And thank you for sharing that. This also just feels like a time to celebrate each of these teams and the work that you're doing. So let's share some appreciation towards them. Yeah, emojis are in the chat, but it's good to recognize, it's long-term work, but there are these big shifts happening. And so finally, want to talk to Kelly Dundon, who's here in Arkansas with the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences Office of Community Health and Research, and I know joined the team while the accelerator was ongoing, and I appreciate you being willing to share today on behalf of the team. And so if you just want to start by introducing yourself and the other organizations that were on the team.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having us. And those are two really tough acts to follow. You both have such incredible energy. So I was glad I got to go third and kind of listen a little bit. So thank you for having us. But like Andrew said, my name is Kelly Dundon. I'm from the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, Office of Community Health and Research, and I work in the Healthy Food Systems team. And so our work is really to provide technical assistance, training, and guidance to institutions, schools, and other organizations that are striving to provide healthy, nutritious foods to their communities, their patients, their students. And the other two organizations that were in our accelerator were Arkansas Children's Northwest Hospital, just located across the street from us. And our partner there was Megan Herman, and she's the food service director at the hospital. And then also the Food Conservancy, which is our local food hub, also in Springdale. And our partner there was Diana Endicott, who is the director of the food hub. And so when I joined the accelerator, my understanding was that being part of this accelerator was just kind of a visioning time to kind of understand, like, what are the opportunities within Northwest Arkansas, especially to be able to help our institutions procure more local foods. And kind of, I think Roberto and Megan also said that, is just being able to build those relationships and those partnerships and being able to understand what are our opportunities, where does our work already overlap, where maybe we could collaborate more closely on. But the accelerator allowed us to do that in, I guess, a more accountable way, a more structured way, and provided a lot of awesome resources and ways of thinking about conversations or about issues, about facilitating meetings with other partners to be able to really get at the core of what our questions are, what our vision is, and how we can achieve those goals together. And so really, when we first started, we were just looking for kind of some low-hanging fruit. We know that in hospitals, it's really hard to get local food oftentimes because of food safety and patient care standards and things like that. And so we started bringing local food bags that are kind of like a CSA bag into the grab and go markets at the hospitals. And so those would feature like 9 to 10 different items. There would be a little card in there that would actually be able to tell whoever's buying it, whether it's a patient, a staff member or family member, where did your food come from? Who are these farmers? What is their story? Providing a little recipe card, providing some backgrounds like on okra or sweet corn or whatever it may be, so that there's also this sort of education component into it. And so we did that also just to gauge interest, like how can we get people in the hospital interested in local food, and what do they like to purchase? Is it a grab and go meal that a nurse after a long day can take home and have a really simple, easy, healthy meal? Is it one of these grab and go bags that has like some little handheld fruits for kids or little easy peelers that they can then have a conversation around? And so that was really where we started. We snowballed that a little bit into actually having some tabling events. So again, kind of some small scale initiatives, but just ways for people to put a face to local food. And so one strategy that we use is our office also runs an AmeriCorps Vista program, which is a national service program. And so we have in our team a farm to institution Vista member. And so she actually helps with the tabling, educating people that come through the hospitals about local food, about the farmers, answering questions. And then there's also some sign-up opportunities for them to get involved with our local CSA. And so we found that this was just a really good way for people that maybe, hadn't ever interfaced with local food or farms before to just have kind of a friendly face and an introduction to be able to feel like, this is for me. And local products can be affordable and they can be accessible to me. And actually this institution is providing that pathway for me. And so that's part of what we've been doing. I think I'm just getting excited and rambling now. So I don't know if there was another question that I'm missing.
Yeah, it's great to hear about the work. I'm glad you shared the piloting that you did, that the team did. I wonder if there were any breakthroughs in the team working together, anything that happened or shifted as a result of you all getting together.
Yeah, I think it was also said by the other teams, but just the relationship building and being able to vision together was just inspiring and also just game changing for us. One thing that we're working on now with both Megan at the hospital and then also with Diane at the Food Conservancy is to be able to really build some toolkits that we can provide to other healthcare offices or hospitals that are interested in procuring local but don't really know what that pathway is. Conversation guides, even some little flow charts, what do you need to know before you start this conversation? What are some pieces that are important as you go through this process and this relationship? And what's been fun about that too is like we're kind of using it as like little interviews. Of course, I already know Megan and I know Diana, but to really take it from that perspective of like totally fresh ears, tell me this like I've never heard it before, and let's see what comes up and let's see if there's something that maybe we haven't talked about before that we missed, has really helped to kind of crystallize those ideas and also put it forth in a way that maybe someone who's never heard of Farm to Institution can feel comfortable with it and feel like they can see themselves in that story.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like a great way to share what you all have learned, and the process will help build relationships as you go.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share that's on the horizon for the team that you're working towards?
If you don't mind showing that graphic, I think it's just beautiful, and it was such a fun process. We used our graphic reporting opportunity to tell that story of Farm to Institution in Arkansas, and we really wanted to highlight those 3 primary stakeholder groups so that anybody that is looking at this, whether they're a producer, a grower, they work at the food hub, they're a distributor, or they're at the institutional level as a staff or a family member, that they can see themselves along the supply chain and also be able to hopefully identify with some of the sort of intrinsic values of investing or participating in our local food system. And so ultimately, we want to also use this as a resource to connect with other hospitals and say, this is the work that we've done. We're going to write kind of a little case study, include some of those toolkits to talk about, to really tell the story of what we did through the accelerator, and then use this image to kind of tag team that.
Awesome. That sounds like a great thing to share with, that we could share as well, like just telling that, that
Yeah.
story that it's, yeah. Thank you so much. For anything else you want to
I think we about covered it, but yeah, this is such an awesome opportunity. So thank you for giving us another chance to kind of reflect on our time.
Yeah, and so a question for the three of you, anyone can answer, is just what's something that you learned through this accelerator process that you'll carry forward? What's something you're taking with you?
I'll go ahead and jump right in, something fresh, but because I did join the accelerator, I think like 6 months into this 18-month term, I was definitely overwhelmed. I was like, what is this? I don't know what we're doing, but I like quickly learned, just being in this group, in this community, just that opening up of just allowing yourself to feel new and to ask questions and to be confused is totally fine and safe. And so I think that this community just made that possible for me.
I'll share one, Andrew. To not be afraid to sniff out where the power is and then take it. You know, I think sometimes, you know, we get a little intimidated by that, but you know, the power mapping exercise that we did with Pakou really just shed a light on everything, and it made it so easy to see that that power shift can happen. And but you have to be willing to go and poke that bear and see what the power they actually have is, and if it's actually, you know, real power.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks,
to tag on to that, Megan. I think I also got a glimpse of how much money there is to do this work, and how much more funders want to support this, and how this is our opportunity. Like, this is our window right now to really kind of bring things to the next chapter of food systems. And so I think the momentum is growing. The partnerships are certainly coming together, and like you said, we just got to take advantage of this opportunity, take the power.
Awesome. That is great. So we got, you know, constant question and like open mind that Kelly shared, taking the power that Megan shared, and Roberto is saying that there's money out there to do this. So that's a great set of things that to take with you. We have a couple of minutes. There was a question that came in for Megan from Anna, I believe. So it was asking if you could explain more about what you mean about stacking at the county level.
I put in a PowerPoint resource there, which explains in a lot more detail. But what we see in West Virginia, which is probably common in other places too, all the money for obesity prevention is really spread all over the state and evaluated just at a programmatic level. But how can we evaluate on a county level to really amplify that county investment and then translate that into some epidemiological changes? So the PowerPoint there shows the methodology that Vishaka Turner is applying, and I'll drop my email in the chat if anyone wants to catch up off the call.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so that's a great way to follow up and having the presentation. Cool, but if there's questions, you can throw them in the chat for the teams. Otherwise, we can go on to the next panel. But thank you all so much for sharing today, and just doing a great job of sharing these examples of your work. And congratulations on your progress.
Yeah, wow. I am just continually so humbled by the brilliance that's within this network, and the potency of that within this small cohort within the accelerator was just like one fractal of what is within this broader network that is the Food Systems Leadership Network. So I just like thank the three of you so much, and all of your teams and your partners, for all of the heart and spirit that you have put into this, I mean, really the accelerator was all about creating space for you to be creative, to learn from each other, to experiment a little bit, and to get some like just great new tools and opportunities to be able to like really have a thorough, intentional process. And like, we just don't really get much resource and support for that. And so I'm so glad that y'all were able to really take advantage of that space and that container that really you co-created. So thank y'all so much. And you know, the next kind of layer of brilliance was supported and nourished by the 3 advisors that we were able to work with. So Haile and Lucia and Pakou, who brought so much to the teams and to us at Wallace Center. Thank y'all so much for being our partners in this whole initiative and like being up for the ride, because it was, you know, Roberto, you used this word earlier, emergent. We very much wanted to take an emergent approach to program design because we didn't really know yet like what was going to be needed, and wanted to be able to respond to what came in a very like iterative and adaptive way. And the advisors were like really up for that. So I just appreciate y'all, because you know, a lot of times our programs are like, you know, kind of specific and linear, or at least like programs like this. And we really kind of scrapped that and just went where the energy needed to be. And y'all were really up for that ride. So thanks for being such good partners. And so I just have a couple of questions for y'all. And you can just speak up as you know, feel the spirit move you. But I know, you know, each of you is really grounded in this work. You've been doing it for a long time, both like at the community level, but also working nationally and being connected to a whole lot of things that are going on in in this effort to really shift institutions towards deeper investment in more equitable food systems. And I'm curious, you know, through your experience with these teams, what through lines did you notice of like the challenges and the opportunities that these teams you were working with that they were experiencing? How does that like kind of tie to the bigger picture challenges and opportunities in this space more broadly, more nationally? So just kind of connecting like the experience here with the bigger picture. And just jump in. Haile, go for it.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in, and I apologize in that my computer may die on me at some point. So so I'm gonna get in when I can. But yeah, no, thank you. And it's been a remarkable treat, a treasure for me to participate in this program, right? Like to learn and co-create alongside these dynamic leaders. I think y'all got a little taste of the whole, right? 3 of the 6 dynamic organizations that participated. And I had the good fortune of additionally working, in addition to the Denver team, alongside Roberto, working with Dr. Heber Brown at Black Church Food Security Network. And it you know, again, for me, the payoff and the excitement comes from learning alongside folks that are innovating. You know, Susan, you bring up the fact that we've been doing this for a while. Sometimes when you've been doing it for a while, like your own style gets stale, right? Not mine, I'm just saying. And you know, so like learning alongside folks that are innovating, that are current, and also like being able to impart and share some of our experiences, having done this for a little while, right? So I mean, themes that I see, right? First and foremost, that this is hard work and it takes perseverance. And it's kind of like often you're taking, you know, 2 steps forward and 1 back, but necessary in order to make change. Roberto said something very critical. I think that folks really need to understand in the context of this work is that, you know, these systems have been created over hundreds of years, and there's no way that we're going to walk it back entirely over the course of 2, right? So it does take a remarkable, I think, amount of perseverance to see beyond just kind of what's in front of you and chart change for the long haul. Megan shared something I think that was incredibly important and talking about generating tools for other hospitals around the region to learn. But I would encourage y'all to think beyond just around the region, right? And really think about like how we're co-creating content that we can share within our broader ecosystem, our larger national food movement, so that we can learn from each other and replicate success. And Susan, you began the conversation in talking about commitments and how commitments may not be sufficient to really affect meaningful change in the near term. And commitments are something that we've been really focused on at Common Market for a little while now, and really trying to pin organizations, anchors into what meaningful commitments are, right? Not small scale commitments, but commitments that are actually going to change the dynamic for the growers that we're engaging, right? Commitments that are going to allow, or that are long enough and significant enough that are going to allow these growers to make an affirmative investment decision in themselves, in their capacity and their infrastructure, so that they can participate and thrive in markets in a more holistic and resilient way. And then finally, I would say that something that Dr. Brown, I think, brought to us early on is in assisting just like dismantling our own paradigms within this work, right? And like, so we, I think, walked into this conversation with a vision for what an anchor institution is. And like many of us were thinking schools and hospitals and universities.
Right.
And, here is Dr. Brown and his work working entirely within the anchor institutions of faith-based communities and within specifically the Black church. And for us all to be thinking about all the different venues where we can affect ecosystem partnerships that work toward meaningful and significant change in service of our communities. So that's those are the things that were swirling around in my mind as folks were sharing. And again, I want to thank the teams for their brilliance, and of course, the Wallace Center for all that y'all brought to this process.
Thanks, Haile. Lucia or Pakou, what were you kind of, connecting both from the experience of the teams with your own work and what you've seen broader at the national level?
Pakou, you want to go ahead? I can't see you.
Oh, go ahead, Lucia. Go, thanks.
Okay, I can start. So everybody has said so many of the things that I've been thinking about, so I'm just going to try to be kind of brief and some thoughts that I had about the trends and the kind of pull through the through lines. First of all, just a big shout out of gratitude to the team members, the advisors, other advisors, Wallace staff. It's been such an honor to work and learn together with you in this space, and I'm really excited to see where the work goes. Some of the thoughts that I'm sitting with are, and that the Wallace program afforded, which I thought was really impactful, was how key it is to have the time and space to plan and generate ideas and strategies. And it's this relationship building piece that others have talked about, which takes a lot of time, given our histories. And it's also not easy to get funded. So it's hard to kind of figure out, how do those relationships get built when you don't have like a program that you have to have a report due in 8 months about. I mean, it's hard. So we have to, I think all of us have to kind of figure out how do we fund the relationship building, which is so critical to this work. Another thing I was thinking about around funding was how challenging, and I heard this throughout conversations with the cohorts about how challenging grant making is. And, lots of money, as Roberto pointed out, there's lots of money out there, lots of money coming down from the USDA and everything. And who's got the time to understand the RFPs, go through the process, develop a proposal, pull in the partnerships? And we've all been there. It's a very arduous, it's a hard process, and it takes some time. So I'm wondering if we can think too about ideas of place-based work, but collective strategies that span over regions with those place-based examples and opportunities, and try to take some of the pressure of looking for grants and getting grants off of the practitioners and the people in the field. And just, I guess, one other thing I would say is that it seemed to me that the cohorts were bringing together, in many cases, several cases at least, people who'd never met each other, you know, and they're in the same region, they're in the same food system, and just how the opportunity to understand all of the stakeholders in the food system, not just the institutions or the producers or the food hub aggregators, but there was this great diversity of roles and responsibilities in the food system. And it just drove home for me the importance of having multi-stakeholder conversations where everybody is at the table, everybody is represented, and we're all learning about things that we don't know about, because it's not our job and it's not our responsibility, and we don't do that for a living. So, and just the last thing I'll say is that it seemed like part of the learning was around a greater understanding of how complex it is for institutions to shift their purchasing, yet often the responsibility ends up falling on the producers and processors with very specific and very hard deadlines and timelines. And I think we need to think about greater understanding needed by the institutions as to how complex and challenging this work is for small and mid-scale producers to enter the institutional market, and really slowing down the pace and giving the time and the opportunity for capacity building. I mean, we've had conversations just end because somebody isn't ready next month and can't do this volume right now. And we just have to, that has to change, I think. So those are my thoughts from.
Thanks, Lucia. Hey, everybody. So first off, I just want to acknowledge and thank again, Susan and Andrew and Ellie and their amazing leadership. I'm reminded that we started this project right before COVID. And I mean, no one could have imagined what these past couple of years were like, and how important local production would be and food security would be. So I wanted to acknowledge that and thank the leadership of the Wallace Center. And also I want to just acknowledge the dedication, man, and the commitment of you all the partners and grantees. Like, what a feat. And I really want to say how much you all inspired me. It's been such a hard couple of years, and you all just powered through. And so I want to lift you up and really say how inspiring you've been. I think when I look back, some 3 observations that I've had. So the first observation was just the focus, the intentional focus placed on farmers of color, I think really made a difference. And I think this work is complex in of itself, that if there wasn't that intentionality, I think trying to center or really looking at who benefits from these type of contracts could have been lost for farmers of color. And so I think that intentionality was really important. Number 2 is I also saw so much innovation that was happening, so much adaptability. So many of you all on the ground, problems came up, certain types of partners dropped, and you all were so adaptable. And I think that adaptability, that innovation that came from that adaptability is really important. And I don't know how we teach that in leaders, but I think that is going to be the type of resilient leaders that is needed to do systems change. And I think thirdly, then, is another thing that I don't think we talked enough about, but I saw the projects that were successful when there was a champion. And within that champion, there was continuity. And I know that we're focusing a lot of attention on the work itself and the systems change, but I also wanted to highlight the importance of doing organizational development and finding funds that's not just going to fund the program, but fund the general operations, the pay parity, funding the coaching and the leadership development of the staff, funding the benefits, the health benefits, or whatever type of benefits that would allow you all in your organizations to retain good staff members and to retain and develop staff members from a junior position to a senior position. Like resilience in the organization, the sustainability in the organization itself, I felt was so critical. Like that's something I observed was so critical in making sure then you had the champions, you had the staff capacity to do the work. And I often think that when we're looking at these type of projects, we focus on the work itself, but we don't think about the actual foundational cost that's required to make sure the work is able to be done. And that was another observation that I had that I really hope that going forward, we can really shed light on and invest in. So those were my 3 observations.
Wow. Thank you, all 3 of you, so much for offering all of that wisdom and insight. Everything that you said resonated with me at like a cellular level. And really just the importance of funding these things that isn't necessarily the project, right? Like the strategy or whatever. It's really about funding time to build connections and relationships and to deeply be intentional about building collaboration. Like that is not something that happens in one meeting. That is something that happens over time through trust, through accountability. And we really need funders to step up and support that. It is so essential. And I just want to really encourage everyone to like build that into your grant proposals. Have it be an objective. One of the things that we were really encouraged by in the gathering in Oregon was hearing directly from USDA that they want to see that relationship building like explicitly named. And we have been trying to build that into our proposals from the Wallace Center and recently had success with that with a newer funder for us. And it was a real, like, we'd had partners encourage us, like, build it in as an objective, that taking the time to build relationships. And we tried it and it worked. So it's just an affirmation to everybody to please make that seen. And Lucia, you also raised something about like, how can we be more collaborative in our grant writing and in our resource development? And one of the other great ideas that came from this group was around developing a master regional food systems partnership proposal that everyone could kind of tweak to make it their own. But those RFSPs are very much focused on network building, relationship building, convening, pulling people together. So that's something that we could do together that could then be utilized and just adapted and made your own, that could really lighten the load for a lot of people. So I love the like creativity and us really stepping forward into what we know is really needed and bringing that to the funding landscape and saying this is actually where we need support. So thank you all so much for really naming that. And Pakou, you know, around just like organizational capacity and actually having staff time to be able to step back and think about and work together on these things. It's just so critical. So thank you all so much for really affirming those learnings. And I think, Ellie, I'm going to pass it to you to I guess a little bit deeper into a conversation with the teams and the advisors.
Yeah, thank you all. It's just been so wonderful to hear everyone's reflections and you know, to hear the advisors and the teams taking ideas that maybe the Wallace team had and like taking them so much further and developing them and just deepening our understanding and also affirming a lot of what we had sort of felt. So it's just been a really sort of reflective and like reciprocal process throughout the last, you know, year and a half working together. So gratitude is the name of the day. So yeah, I'm gonna just throw out some questions, and advisors and team members feel free to popcorn, and folks in the audience, if you have questions, throw them in the chat and we can share those as well. So we started to talk about kind of how important it is to fund staff development, collaboration time, relationship development, and, you know, strategic work. But I'm wondering what else you all see that the funding community, government, institutions can do differently to help build wealth in communities of color. Obviously, this sort of personal development work is really critical, but what other key investments or support is needed from those key players, do you think?
I'll, if I may, I'll jump out in
Please,
front again
yeah.
before my computer goes.
Here's your moment.
Yeah, I was really excited by you know, the USDA alluding to a NOFO recently that focuses on land access, capital access, and market access. And if USDA has never written anything that has spoken to me, it was in that moment and reading how that program was described. And I think the thing that was exciting for me, it was a much more holistic approach to addressing the needs of vulnerable farmers, and in particular farmers of color, and thinking about really the breadth of ecosystem interventions and engagement and attention that is required to actually build long-term wealth in agricultural communities. And so that is something that I'm excited about. I think that they're going to release the RFA pretty soon, and I encourage folks to explore that.
It looks like Susan just put the press release about that program in the chat. So yeah, thanks Haile for bringing up land access. It is so fundamental and so basic and still very far out of reach for you know, folks who could really use it to build wealth. So thanks for bringing that up.
I'd like to also kind of add on to what Haile just shared. You know, one of the biggest challenges that we have is working with larger food service companies that are not inclusive of local producers and have so many barriers, but who hold all the contracts. And I'd love to find some way to just create pathways for collaboration with them. If there's a funder that wants to promote a program where let's do a pilot to see how we can work with Sodexo or with Aramark or you know, some of the other big players, so that we can learn, hey, this is possible, this is what we need to do, this is how to scale participation in these major supply chains, and look how it's benefiting BIPOC producers. You know, there's a lot of intentional ways that we're excluded through rebates and kickbacks that purchasing agents receive, that even if we have everything in place, it always comes down to battling with that. And there has to be a third way that reconciles that kind of tension to be much more collaborative and inclusive. And like, we could do this. We're all part of the food system. So like, let's work together.
Just to echo some of the things Roberto said about pathway and pipeline building, you know, it's so important to fund the relationship building within those networks. But one of the things we've seen, I think, from our project is we need to find funding to create a third space for the institutions to be able to develop relationships within their systems. And we've been very fortunate where I've embedded myself within this system to create a different system with our partners, but there's still the challenge of how is funding for hospitals and foundations to be able to create that third space without having a deliverable anchored there. So we'll keep doing it on a shoestring, but there's definitely a need for support there.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I'm just seeing some chatter in the chat box here. Catherine shared a link about some exciting work going on in Massachusetts. So check that link out and we'll share that with the call recording as well. And then hearing a reflection from Anna about being a small hub in a rural area and having even a challenge partnering with a larger food hub that has access to a big urban market. So, you know, just feeling like there's maybe some competition and a lack of coordination among folks maybe that even have the same values and the same goals. Yeah, Anna, did you have a question?
I just was gonna say, echoing Roberto and Megan's comments, and particularly in that realm, in addition to sort of the possibility of, you know, the larger groups negotiating with folks like Sodexo or some of these larger groups to help fund opportunities for pilots, which I totally think would be great, because then they could put out RFPs or calls within their regions or local institutional areas to be able to do that work, and it would sort of push those institutions themselves to be part of the change. But also funds to pay community members and key organizations to participate in learning. not just relationship building, but even just learning about what it means in this food systems change, because the language that we're all using is language that we all understand really well, but there's so many of our partners and communities that don't understand this language and don't get what we're even talking about. And it takes time to just even build a level of awareness and understanding and where they fit into those things. And so the money to pay them to participate in that, because so many of them are so stretched thin, and funding for grant writing so that we can do all that heavy lifting that Lucia was talking about, that sort of bear of the actual like slugging through all that paperwork, and for grant writers to help with that would be huge.
I have something to add too around the funding. The importance of, comes to me all the time, the importance of increasing staffing capacity to move this process from the time an institution makes a commitment to 50% local and sustainable and equitable food to actually getting a signed contract. There is so much complexity and so much sort of consistent communication and somebody holding that piece to get it all the way to a contract. And that work is not in anyone's job description. It's not in a food service operator at a hospital. It's not on a farmer. It's not on a, you know, a kitchen, a commercial kitchen processor. So I just think this idea too, I mean, we in our project here in Northern California, we had the good fortune to be able to hire a specialist who that's what she focuses on. It's like from, you know, she is all about getting the thing signed. And like I don't think we understood how difficult and time consuming that is. And we also just didn't have the expertise to do that contracting. So I just want to put a plug in for just increased staffing around that contracting piece.
Yeah, thanks, Lucia. It sounds like so much of the work that needs to happen is in sort of that connective tissue and in that persistence of someone staying on top of it and learning the rules and figuring out how to fit all the pieces together. And that can take a really long time. And, you know, we're used to 1 or 2 year grant cycles, and it might take a lot longer than that. And then eventually maybe you'll get there. But I think the time frames that relationship development takes, that persistence takes, that, you know, really complex problem solving takes, sometimes they're going to be a lot longer than your, you know, 1 or 2 year grant cycle. Yeah, and as Patty said, same as on the production side, for a farmer to be able to ramp up their production and start meeting those standards that a hospital maybe is going to be asking for isn't necessarily going to take 1 growing season. So I'm mindful of time, and obviously we're all really excited about this topic. But I just wanted to ask, before we wrap up with some reflections from the Wallace team, what are you all excited about in the movement of working with institutions? What do you feel like is on the horizon? Folks from the teams talked a little bit about sort of what's next for their particular work, but, you know, Haile, you were talking about that there's so much experimentation, there's so much creativity. Where's Farm to Institution going next?
Yeah, so I think where it needs to go, and actually where there's opportunity, fortunately, is in more meaningful long-term commitments from institutions. And so working with these anchors that are values-driven, that exist to serve the better interest of the communities where they are, working with them around values mapping and materiality, and getting them to make firm commitments to the communities they're trying to support, and in particular within the food space. And so I'm excited about work happening in Atlanta right now, where we're doing just that. Building a campaign around commitments, around values, around long-term procurement planning, crop planning with farmers, and you know, back to.
Oh, did the computer finally die? All right, well, we might have lost Haile, but I feel like we got a lot of good stuff out of him before the computer died. Any other folks want to share sort of what they see on the horizon, what they, you know, feel like the future of Farm to Institution holds?
Ellie, can I just add that I see a lot of folks in this work lifting hard, and I do think, and I don't know if this is part of the work, but I do think there has to be some public policy changes. I saw in Arkansas, and the folks in the Arkansas team can probably speak more to this, but when the law that was passed recently in Arkansas mandated that some of the funding from farm to school had to come from local farmers, like that made a difference. And so I know that we were doing many of the teams are doing a lot of work on like what's here and now, but I think that if there were some policy changes that came, really could lubricate this work a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Pakou. I think that, sustainability piece rests a lot on some of those policy realities.
Yeah, I
I'm
think.
glad you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Kelly. Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just gonna piggyback onto what Pakou said, and I'm glad you brought that up, because in Arkansas we are lucky in the sense that we have this Local Food Farms and Jobs Act that basically mandates that institutions that receive a certain amount of money every year from the state and then operate a food service program, they need to set a goal that 20% of their food is procured locally. That's just a goal, but what is required is that they report on that spending every year to the ag department. And so we facilitate that reporting with them and the evaluation. And so this is our 5th year of collecting that data. And so finally, after kind of getting a little bit over like the emergency of COVID and getting a little bit more stabilized, we're seeing that data actually come back very like clean and reliable. And so we can actually use that to start to understand what procurement at institutions in Arkansas looks like and be able to identify, like Pakou said, some of those champions and be able to learn from them. I think our state has a really strong farm to school model, and being able to kind of learn from them and transfer some of their sort of like pillars of farm to school into other institutional settings, I think is a really strong opportunity.
Awesome, thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'm very, it's kind of weird to say it, optimistic about is just the fact that institutions are realizing they have no choice but to commit to sustainable local procurement. I mean, we've kind of gotten ourselves into a very, very precarious situation with our soils, our food supply, our supply chains, and like I don't see any other choice but to build up local regional food systems. That's the only hope we have to address immediate challenges now, but also for the future generations of the people that make decisions of those institutions. So I think it's on the horizon, because that's just how we survive, is to do this work, and we have no other choice. So I'm embracing that realization, and I think we're going to just see the impact of our procurement choices, whether they're good or bad, felt much more deeply in the future.
I'll just add, we're at the tipping point. Institutions have to consume consciously, and we're all doing the work to make that possible. And we're tipping it over. So I'm so proud of everybody, and thank you all for all the work y'all do.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the optimism and the energy, and I feel like it's going to take all of us collaborating. And I think there's sort of a thought that has occurred to me a lot in the course of this accelerator, which is just an adage that goes, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. And I've been thinking so much about that idea as we've done this work through the accelerator, and how valuable collaboration and the deep, reliance and trust on each other is in getting us to go far. So I did just want to share a couple little sort of reflections from the Wallace team. I think one that's come up a lot in the conversation so far is how essential and time consuming deep strategy work and relationship development and collaboration is. And it's hard to get it paid for. And so I think one of the things our goal was, we gave the teams $10,000 each through this program, which isn't a ton of money, but our idea was that maybe it's just a little bit of seed funding, or just enough to kind of create a little space in folks' work life to be able to do that strategy work. And you know, it certainly wasn't enough, but it felt like it at least helped and made a dent and bought people some time to be able to tell their bosses, hey, no, this is something important that we're gonna, you know, pause and take the time to do. We also, as you know, Pakou was mentioning, we have to invest in people because turnover was a huge thing that happened in a lot of the teams, in almost all of the teams. Folks changed positions, folks changed roles, people came and went. And I think that, you know, is partially just because the pandemic threw everybody's lives into chaos, but also, you know, sometimes the pace that we're expected to work at is a little unsustainable. And so that turnover thing was really real for us. And then the last piece is just that, you know, that collaboration is essential, and these multi-sectoral collaborations are really the thing that I think is gonna get us where we're trying to go. I know Susan had to jump. She had to go pick up her nephew at the bus stop. But Andrew, any other reflections that you want to share before I close this out?
I want to ask everybody a question through a
Oh,
poll
yeah.
about whether you learned something on the call today that's meaningful to your work. So you'll see that come in. Just one thing to see how this is we've never done a call like this before, closing on an accelerator. So, but yeah, as far as learnings, I want to reinforce what Haile said about the Black church being an institution, and it's helped me think about all the assets churches have and connections to community and land ownership. Like churches are some of the biggest land owners in our country, and also they're committed to their communities and have local mission funds. And I know it's a complicated area, but I think there are ways that a church can be an asset if you just look at it differently. So that's a reflection back to think about what other institutions might be that we're not thinking of right now.
Yeah, awesome. The last thing I wanted to plug before we cut out here is that on September 20th at 3 o'clock Eastern, we're actually hosting a call with H. Frombach, who is a friend and partner who works in California and has been doing a pilot program with Sodexo in Northern California to get big corporate buyers to work with BIPOC farmers. And H and Renee McKeon, who's the head of sustainability or the VP of sustainability at Sodexo, are going to be on that call, walking through that pilot and kind of describing how it might be adapted in other places. So that's September 20th. Andrew put the link in the chat, and we hope to see you all there. And I think that's it for the Wallace team. It's 5 o'clock on the East Coast. So thank you so much for everyone who came and listened. Thank you so much to the teams and advisors for sharing all of this inspiring energy with us. It certainly made it, you know, exciting and inspiring for me to come to work every day for the last 18 months to work with you all. So a lot of gratitude, and everyone take care of yourselves and enjoy what's left of the summer. Thanks, y'all. Take care.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You all be well.
Thank you.
Everybody.